Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of Eric Talks About ISIL. So, I wanted to make another video here because things have changed both in the sense of events on the ground have changed, and my thinking on the topic has also changed. I would say my thinking on the topic has evolved substantially. So, first, I think it's important that when you're discussing this topic at all, that you frame it properly, right? And in terms of framing it properly, I think in this instance, we're looking at the affirmative basically making what's going to be fundamentally a moral argument, right? On one level, that, it's in the U.S.'s best interest to defeat tyranny, kind of an argument. But it doesn't necessarily have to be framed like that. A lot of teams, I think, are going to frame it as purely well, let's say, we're going to stabilize the region and everyone will reap the benefits of a stable, modern world economy capable Middle East. So, you could frame it economically or whatever. Basically the fundamental problem the app has is you're saying, well, let's go send American soldiers to die in order to clean up this 60 or 70-year-old mess in the Middle East. I was looking at, actually today, believe it or not, a Life magazine from 1952 or something, 1954. And it said one of the goals was to pacify the Middle East. I like how they use the word pacify, right? Well, we're still trying to pacify the Middle East. And it's 15. So, the point is, the affirmative has to make an argument that, well, okay, what the affirmative needs to do is to take this instance out of the context of those 60 or 70 years of history, or to frame those 60 or 70 years of history very carefully, right? So that it's not, in fact, 60 or 70 years of conflict in the Middle East that we've yet to be able to do anything about. It is instead 60 or 70 years of conflict in the Middle East that we have successfully prevented thus far from getting completely out of hand, and that will get completely out of hand if we don't continue to exercise an ongoing maintenance program of violence, basically. Like, we need to go kill them periodically, or else they'll get too strong, kind of an argument. And I think there's definitely something to be said for that, insofar as one can make a legitimate claim that it is the duty of good people to step up and say, no, I'm not going to let you abuse those other people, when the good people have the wherewithal to do so, right? Certainly that's what we would teach children in school about bullying, is that if you see somebody being bullied, you should do something about it, right? And that's basically what's happening here. We've got these fundamentalist militants, ISIL people, and they are bullying all the other people into obeying their ways. So, alright. The reason I'm taking a long time to get here, but one of the other reasons why things are dramatically different in my mind now is an article that came out a couple of days ago by Johnson. It's called Means Matter. It's from a war blog, and one of the things he talks about is a lot of the specific tactical reasons why ground troops will be more effective than airstrikes or some other means. And he makes the argument, one, that we need ground troops now. We didn't need them before when we were still in the airstrikey phase. Recent successes by Iraqi special forces, which are to say, like, the progress they made in Tikrit, or however you say that city's name, and anyway, those recent progresses have simply driven the soldiers from ISIL into an underground status that is equivalent to the status of the fighters in Sadr city, which is SADR, and also in Fallujah prior to that, during the actual war phase of the invasion in 2002? 2003? Anyway, those equivalencies are really going to be effective because I really like the way this article discusses the tactics used in Sadr, in which the U.S. military set up basically a series of blockades. They basically walled them in and kept making the room that they had smaller until they had to actually try to prevent the U.S. from continuing to build this like enclosure thing, and then they decided they had to fight us, fight the U.S. soldiers, and of course they lost. So that's the thing, is like, we all know that ISIL cannot actually defeat the U.S. Army in any sort of conventional fight where they're standing over there and we're standing over here and we're shooting at each other, right? And we know where you are and you know where we are. Well, our weapons are better and our soldiers are more well trained, and we're gonna win. But we're gonna kill you and you'll kill a couple of us, right? Okay, so that's the situation that the Appt has on its side, is that in a real military sense, what is the most militarily wise decision to make if your only goal is to win the war, quote unquote? Well, obviously it's to send in ground troops and send whatever warfare resources one has, like bombs and etc. The tricky part, of course, is you want to defeat ISIL, but you don't want to kill the 700,000 people in the city who aren't ISIL members, right? You want to kill maybe the 60,000 who are, but ideally not kill, 100,000 toddlers in the process, right? So that means that's definitely an Appt argument, because of course you can send in the ground troops, and the ground troops are able to differentiate, and they're able to shoot one bullet into the ISIL soldier and not shoot a bullet into the toddler, whereas the bombs from a plane, they don't do that. They don't have that kind of discretion, right? So all those things are good Appt arguments, and I strongly recommend you read the Johnson article, and I'm going to put up one of the cards I cut from it here on this blog, and I will link to it too, so you can cut your own cards from it as well if you want, because I'm helpful like that. Anyway, this article came out on the 19th, and today's the 21st. The nice thing about it is I don't think it's going to get dated because it's written post Iraqi success into crit, and so as a consequence I think it's going to hold up pretty well. But I'll continue updating with new information on ISIL because, as I said, things are constantly evolving. Anyway, on the neg side, just to clarify, I think your best bet is to say this is a mess that's going to go on for another 20 years or something. Let's look at it again in a decade, and maybe if we want to send some troops in then, if they haven't cleaned it up, but we have screwed around there long enough. Can we just put an end to this whole Middle East foray with the military, kind of like, let's go into the forest and see what happens this time, kind of adventurous spirit? I think that's the neg position, basically, and I think you want to argue that you've got solvency to the extent that solvency can be had in the status quo via Iranian, Iraqi, and potentially even Syrian regional powers, I guess, that are acting against ISIL. Now, ISIL is in a weird relationship with Syria because they're also targeting a lot of the Syrian opposition groups who they see as competition for their primacy as the outsider with power, right? Obviously, the formal government is the insider with power. They're the official power. But if you're going to have a group that's seizing power through use of force, illegally, quote unquote, well, then that would be considered an outsider group. And ISIL is one such outsider group. Obviously, it's been referred to as a protostate by some people, which is to say it's making the transition from outsider group into actual government. But it's by no means legitimate in the eyes of most of the rest of the world, obviously. And as a consequence, the more legitimate governments in the region are all fairly well united against it. There isn't a state in the Middle East that says, we're with ISIL. Yeah, we like what you're doing. We want to be on your side. And the reason is because those who speak for Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates or Kuwait or Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan or Israel even, or any of those other Middle Eastern places, Qatar and stuff like that. Anybody who might speak for them is obviously a representative of that nation's government. And those nations' governments, they have a vested interest in maintaining their own legitimate control over their territory and people. And they don't want to see an upstart like ISIL seizing control of land from legitimate governments, because it's a bad precedent for them, right? Because what are they going to do if ISIL comes in and tries to seize some of their land? Well, maybe they're corrupt and they're bad leaders too, but they don't want to give up their power regardless. So obviously they're going to oppose this non-state actor functioning as a state and fielding an army and seizing territory and stuff. So, I mean, I think the NEG has that on its side, which is to say, here's an opportunity for the Middle Eastern Muslim world to deal with its own fanaticism problem on its own terms, because everybody over there seems to be in agreement that ISIL's bad. We're all on the same team here. We're willing to provide all sorts of support, but we don't need to provide ground troops to. In fact, if anything, it's like, you got to let the baby bird peck its own way out of the shell, right? You can't peel the shell off for it, or else it comes out all floppy and weak. I saw a science video on it in elementary school. I remember being very saddened by it. I still remember this video to this day. Anyway, you can't do that. So the NEG makes that argument. Let them deal with it. They'll figure it out, and they'll fix it. And then, so what if Iran gets hegemony? Aren't we making a nuclear deal with them anyway? Well, that's the other new thing, right? The nuclear deal with Iran. So that's going to really mess up your Iranian hegemony bad arguments on the NEG. So don't even go there, though. It's weak. How do you impact it anyway? I think it's BS. So I'm out of time because I got this 15-minute time limit on these videos at YouTube. So thank you for listening if you did, and I'll post some corresponding text to go along with this fine mixed media presentation.